Thank you all for being here today, whatever time it is for you. We're just grateful to see your smiling faces, that we could be together. These campfire conversations are CCI's way of keeping the global world connected, where we can being in a space of fellowship and also a space of learning and encouraging. And, this is, as you know, you can hardly turn on the news anywhere, and it's just not covered with conflict. It just seems like everywhere we turn. And that's particularly difficult for children. And that's what makes today's conversation especially meaningful. As we look around and we receive stories of camps in the world where there's instability or uncertainty, it's fragile, or it's just outright conflict, which we're seeing much more of that than maybe ever in the last 80 years. These are moments when Christian camping becomes something very powerful. It already is, but oftentimes when people think of Christian camping, they think of the fun and the adventure, which it's all of those things, but they're havens, they're safe places of community and belonging. And today we have the privilege of hearing from a remarkable individual I've gotten to know over the past few years, who has done a tremendous amount of research and is here in the States as a safe place because she's from Ukraine, where war has been raging for years now. So our guest, Tanya Levchuck, is a leader from Ukraine, and she's been studying how Christian camps are helping young people find stability and resilience during seasons of war. And through her research and experience, she's seen firsthand how camps can restore a sense of normal life while also nurturing faith and hope. It's a hope-filled story, and she's an amazing individual at the scholarly level looking at this, and we're grateful for the work that she's done. We're grateful for her friendship to CCI and her contribution over the years, and I want to give her the maximum amount of time here. So Tanya, thank you for being with us. Thank you for the work that you've done. Thank you just for your heart for the Lord and for the people of your country, and your hope for peace in this world and the work you do through camps. So let's begin. Tanya, I'm turning over to you.
Thank you, Bill, for a kind introduction. And let me just share my presentation real quick. And yeah, I am very honored to be here today and share a story about Ukraine that is actually not in the news. That's not something that you will read in the news. And when people talk about Ukraine right now, they talk about destruction, pain, loss, which is all very true. But there is also a different story, and that's something that I want to share today. I left Ukraine a few months after the war started. And because I was closely connected with CCI in Ukraine, I saw firsthand how Christian camps, and actually a lot of churches too, at that time, they had to put aside their existing goals and they had to focus on immediate needs. Camps were turned into humanitarian hubs, assisting with evacuation, providing shelter, and taking care of basic needs of people. That was 2022. In 2023, however, majority of displaced people, they either found a more permanent place to stay or they moved abroad, which is why a lot of camps in relatively safe regions, they opened to summer programs. And because a lot of people left, there was a huge need for training, which a lot of camps could not provide at the time, which is why CCI Ukraine planned our first in-person event after the start of the invasion. And it was supposed to be a small event in one of the regions in the west of Ukraine, and we expected about 100 people. But what happened is that people just kept signing up. And normally we would have closed the registration as soon as we reached the number that the venue could accommodate. But there was this understanding that the changed circumstances called for a different approach, which is why all that to say, this very small event turned out to be an event for 513 participants from all over Ukraine, and many of them were very young. And when I looked at this picture, I thought something is going on there. And amidst all of this destruction and loss and pain, God is actively at work in Ukraine. And that's the story I want to know more about. And this was my primary motivation for this research as a part of my thesis in grad school. There was another one. One of the camp professionals, Jacob Sorensen, once said that when we talk about Christian camps, we need two things when we want to make a case for camp. We need good stories and we need good data. And the thing is that we have a lot of stories about Christian camps in Ukraine, and we can share a lot of stories, but we just don't have enough research. And I thought this situation is unique. I am deeply involved with Christian camping in Ukraine. And right now I am in the United States in a good Christian school during this very critical time for my country. So maybe this research is an opportunity I don't want to miss, which is why I will share some of my findings with you today. And I believe that even though you may serve in a very different context than we do right now, you may find some of these findings relevant to your situation as well. So my research question was, what is the benefit of Christian camp programs for adolescents who experienced war in Ukraine? And I wanted to hear firsthand from people who served in Ukraine and also from parents of campers, because something that completely blew my mind was how could parents let their children go to the camp during this time? I stayed in Ukraine just a few months after the war started, but I remember this feeling that you just need to know where your family is, where each member of your family are, because you need to know they are okay. And I just wanted to understand how could parents let their children go for a week or 10 days? And there must be something in Christian camps that made it worthwhile to take this risk. And of course, before I started collecting data, I looked into what already existed in the literature. And I focused on three topics that would inform my question. So the first topic was the development of adolescents. That's the age I decided to focus on. And what do we need to know about their development? What is needed for good, positive development and flourishing? And what happens when trauma disrupts this environment that is necessary for positive development? And my third topic was, can camps as temporary community be an answer to this problem, or at least a part of the answer? What can we offer as a way to mitigate the effects of trauma? So I will share just a few thoughts about each one of these topics. The teenage years are characterized by multiple changes on different levels. And some authors even claim that this age is marked by brain plasticity that can be compared to the early childhood, which means immense potential for growth, but also increased vulnerability. Traditionally, when we talk about this stage of life, the emphasis can be on the challenges, such as risky behaviors, negative peer influence, or maybe strained relationships with authority figures. And all of that is true, but this represents a deficit approach that focuses on the question, how can we prevent the teenagers from failing? So while all these risks are very real, there is also a different approach called positive youth development, which focuses on the question, how can we not just prevent the failure, but how can we help young people fully develop their potential? And it's focused on developing the so-called 6 C's: competence, confidence, character, connection, caring, and contribution. And it is believed that if we help our young people develop all these assets, it will equip them to face challenges in life and still develop positively. In the literature, this approach is closely connected with developing resilience, which was, of course, very important for my research here. Another thing that was significant for me in this PYD approach is that the role of community is crucial for developing these assets. And that's where we already can make connections to the camps, because one of the core elements of camp programs is community. So summing it up, if we create conditions for young people to develop competence, confidence, and other components of positive youth development approach, we help them be equipped not only to avoid risks of the adolescence period, but also to reach their full potential and develop resilience that can help them do well even in the times of great adversity. If the environment is so important for positive development, what happens if the structures that support teenagers in their development are shattered? How does trauma impact development at this stage? There is a lot of data about the biological impact of trauma, which leads to difficulty with emotional regulation due to disrupted balance between amygdala and the frontal lobes. Specific to the situation in Ukraine, some of the abnormal experiences that have become a part of everyday life include normalization of violence and the loss of this feeling of safety and security because of the constant threat that cannot be controlled. Daily air raids and drone attacks have become a part of life. And sometimes when teenagers share those stories, they speak about those occurrences as if they were just ordinary events. It just become a part of their life. Many Ukrainian children can now identify a missile just by the sound of it flying, and knowledge that they should not have at this time, at this age, or ever. Multiple layers of loss include the loss of family members or acquaintances, the loss of social contacts due to relocation, loss of homes, loss of places where they belong. For some of them, in a certain sense, a loss of future, because it's been noticed that some teenagers just don't want to talk about the future and they don't want to dream about the future because of this total loss of control and inability to plan for the future. Just think about the children who started school during COVID online, and then they had to continue doing school online because of the war. And it's been already 4 years of the war. And in some areas of Ukraine, they even started building underground schools in the hope that they would give children some kind of normal school experiences. And that's only a fraction of what their experiences include. The consequences of trauma include the increased risk of PTSD and depression, and panic attacks, sleep disorders, and also a phenomenon that we called forced maturity, and I will talk more about it later. Just a few more numbers about the war. The invasion that happened in February 2024 created the largest displacement crisis in Europe since World War II, with catastrophic consequences for children. The risk of developing a depressive state among Ukrainian children and adolescents increased 24-fold. And this is 2023 data. I don't have any more, I don't have more recent data on this, but my guess is that this number may be higher now, because back in 2023, much more people were hopeful that this war will be over soon, which which is, right now it's much harder to maintain that hope. Just in the first week of the war, 50,000 children were displaced, which meant, again, losing social contacts, using the sense of belonging, and a lot of loss. And as of 2024, 6.8 million Ukrainians are recorded as refugees globally. I can go on and on about what is actually happening in Ukraine, but we don't have time for that, and that's not the point of this webinar. And that's actually the information you can find in the news if you're interested. But there is one phenomenon that I feel like requires additional attention. For the sake of this study, we decided to call it forced maturity. Because of what happened, because of what they have experienced, and because sometimes young people are burdened with adult responsibilities they are not developmentally ready for, they may seem to be more mature than is expected for their age. Every story is different, but mostly what happened was that adolescents had to take responsibility for younger siblings or sometimes even for their parents. In some cases, caregivers were so affected by the war and so confused that they were not able to make much sense of it and much less explain it to their children, which is why adolescents were forced to wrestle with adult questions, trying to make sense of everything on their own. And these adult questions include wrestling with loss, understanding of justice, God's goodness, evil in this world, and so on. Many families had to separate because mothers took their children abroad to a safe place, while under the martial law, fathers could not leave the country. And some families found a way to navigate that, and others just separated. And in many cases, children blamed themselves because they saw themselves as being a reason for this separation. However, not everyone who is exposed to trauma develops symptoms at clinically significant levels. Even though adolescents can be very vulnerable because they are at this developmental stage, they also can develop remarkable resilience. This photo that you see on this slide, I took it from the news, and it was taken in one of the Ukrainian schools. The school building was completely destroyed. But these kids, who were high school graduates, they decided they would still have their graduation ceremony at school. They still dressed up beautifully, and they had their graduation dance, which is a tradition. Many things were taken away from them, but it seems like they decided that they will not let this one thing to be taken away. And I think it's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. And it's not the single case. The graduation ceremonies like that happened all over Ukraine, and it's just one of the examples of remarkable resilience. But the question we ask today is, what makes the difference? Why do some adolescents develop this great resilience while for others the effects of similar trauma is catastrophic? There may be multiple reasons for that, but many authors agree that on two things: the inner resource and the support of community. When we talk about the inner resource, it takes us back to positive youth development again, knowing that if we help them develop those assets, confidence, competence, character, and so on, we equip them for any challenges they may encounter in life. And the community support is important. Interestingly, even secular studies affirm the importance of religious coping. Being a part of a church community is so important because, for one, it gives you support, it gives you more people in your life to support you, but also it gives you hope. And it appears it's so important to have this transcendent hope. Resilient children need resilient communities. They need communities that still have agency, communities that still are able to make a difference, even when a lot of things appear to be out of their control. Now, can camps be an answer to this problem? What can we offer as Christian camps? We cannot stop the war. We cannot make the war stop traumatizing our children. But is it possible that camps can mitigate these effects of trauma? I will not talk a lot about temporary communities because you are all camp professionals. And of course, you know a lot about the benefits of creating a temporary community. I will just emphasize a few things that were important for this particular study. Camps are generally recognized as places where those who experience grief, loss, or other adversities can rest and heal. And there are multiple reasons why camps are good places for development and growth. First, the fact that it is a temporary community. I've heard a ton of stories about how kids tried something for the first time at a camp because it just feels less risky because it is a temporary community. It feels less risky to try, a leadership role or try something else because it is not your permanent community. Camp programs usually offer a balance of support and challenge, and young people can grow in independence, responsibility, friendships, and all of this is important for resilience. And again, the additional factor about faith-based camps is that religion is actually connected to a lot of protective factors. So it seems that if we use all of these benefits of Christian camps, we can help young people in the times when they experience, all of these traumatic events. Because Christian camps are different in different parts of the world, I will just say a few words about Ukraine and camps in Ukraine. Excuse me. Before 1991, Christian camps were not even possible at all because before that time, Ukraine was a part of the Soviet Union, and under the Soviet regime, having any programs, any Christian programs, much less programs that involved children, was just not possible. It was illegal and it was persecuted. In 1991, Ukraine became independent, and almost immediately there were first attempts at Christian camping without any formal training and with very little resources at that time. Program directors used to joke that if you had a tape or a stapler, you can do anything. So they just had to become very creative designing their programs. In 1996, CCA Ukraine was established, and the main focus was to provide some good training. And I think it's amazing how quickly churches embrace this new ministry. It almost feels like they were waiting for the moment when they could start Christian camping. And I think it's especially amazing because the word camp could have quite a negative connotation for some people under the Soviet regime. Because many churches started this ministry not having a lot of resources, of course, they couldn't buy or rent or even build their campsite, which is why most camps did their program on rented facilities. And even now we have Christian camps that they have their own campsites, but the majority of Christian camps in Ukraine, they're what we call program camps, meaning that they design their program and then they rent a facility to run their program, which means that a lot of Christian camps are closely affiliated with local churches. As I already said, there is not a lot of research about Ukrainian camps. The earliest one that we know of was done in 2015. And according to it, Christian camps are the second most influential ministry to build relationship with the younger generation. And because we don't have any earlier studies, it's hard to tell when this ministry became so influential. But there is no doubt it's the fastest growing ministry in Ukraine. In 2022, we faced a different reality, and we just had to change as Christian camps what we were doing. And because by that time we already had a well-developed network of Christian camps, we could help a lot with evacuation efforts in 2022. In 2023, when camps opened their doors to camp programs again, with this new reality, we realized that there was a huge need for training in skills that were not as necessary before. Skills that would allow us to create trauma-informed programs. Taking it all together, what we know about Christian camps in general, and Christian camps specifically in Ukraine, in the Ukrainian context, we can say that Christian camps can be a favorable environment that may not only foster growth, faith formation, and positive development of adolescents, but also can offer positive interventions for adolescents who struggle with the effects of trauma, specifically war-related trauma. This is what I've learned from the existing literature and also from my personal experience being involved in Christian camps. In the next session of this webinar, I will share some of the results of my study and the data I collected. We will move on. So now I will just share a few words about how I collected data. My research question was, how do teenage campers who experienced war in Ukraine benefit from summer camp programs? And I did interviews with camp counselors, program coordinators, and also with campers' parents. And the majority of my respondents were from the Western Ukraine, just because that's where it was more possible for camps to operate. And then I did a thematic analysis of the thoughts and stories that my participants shared. And as a result of that, 4 major themes emerged. So Christian camps during the war in Ukraine benefit adolescents because they provide faith formation, supportive community, a sense of normalcy, and positive youth development. My first observation was that 3 of these 4 themes were not specific to the war at all. And even the one that seems to be unique, a sense of normalcy, when I spent more time thinking about it, I realized that even this one is not as unique as I had initially thought. So what does this tell us? That even the war did not change the fact that the greatest benefits of Christian camps are still faith formation, supportive community, and positive development. In this book, Build to Last, the authors propose their own recipe for organizations that achieve long-term success. They call those companies visionary companies. And so these organizations, what they have in common, they consistently preserve the core values and purpose while simultaneously stimulating progress and changes in their practices. The reason I'm sharing this is why it's important to know what our core is. The fact that the war did not change the fact that faith formation, community, and development are among the greatest benefits gives me a reason to think that maybe this is the core. And we don't want to lose sight of what is the core of Christian camping. My observation here is that if Christian camps stay true to their mission and purpose, they will continue being effective, even in times of great adversity. So I will just spend a couple of minutes on talking on, these different themes that emerged. And so The first one is faith formation. So my participants talked about the importance of faith formation as having an anchor in the storm. The way faith formation happens is that the immersive environment of a Christian camp is designed to remove distractions and foster connection to God, with God. Modeling is a big part of it when campers can see their counselors living out their faith. Camps is a safe place to wrestle with difficult questions. One of the participants said that they need a reference point in time of adversity, in time of instability, when some of their beliefs about God, humanity, and justice are being challenged. My participants also noted the importance of prayer, especially corporate prayer, that brought a great comfort. Most families in Ukraine have someone in the army. And so the prayer for their safety, for their loved ones, helped them keep hoping and brought them a lot of comfort. The second theme was supporting community. One program coordinator said, "We give them people." And I think this simple phrase sums it all up. Having people around who can relate to what they experienced, even when every individual story is very different, it is very important. One of the camp counselors who lost her husband in this war, she shared her perspective. She said, "We just need to know that we are not alone. We need to know that there are people around who are going through something similar and they can relate and understand." A camp community provides a place of belonging for adolescents who feel disconnected from their communities because they either are displaced or their friends are displaced. Being in a community that is supportive helps them process trauma, share stories, and receive validation. And of course, having non-familial adults in their lives who offer mentorship, guidance, and modeling. That's also appears to be very important. And that's just a little bit about why supportive community is so important. It's important at any times, but especially in the times of crisis. As for positive youth development outcomes, it was interesting to notice that although my participants did not use positive youth development terminology, and some of them never heard about it, it was very clear that from their stories that the outcomes of positive youth development are present. I've heard stories, especially from campers' parents, about how their son or their daughter tried something new and discovered something about themselves. You can see one of the quotes on the slide. What is interesting, while 5 C's from this framework were clearly present, the sixth one, contribution, was only mentioned once or twice. Again, I didn't dig deep into that, but my understanding is that there are a few reasons for that. Sometimes contribution comes as a result of having all other five C's. So if the competence, confidence, connection are present, then a person can contribute to the community. And the camps in Ukraine are just too short to see that happening at the camp if there is just a week or 10 days. It's not long enough. But camps who had a robust follow-up program, like a youth camp or youth club or something after the camp, they sometimes could see that contribution happening in the permanent community after the camp. Another thought, which again, I didn't do a lot of research here, but just hypothesis here, is that when we talked about forced maturity, and sometimes they have so many responsibilities in their permanent community, when they come to the camp, to the safe place, they are finally ready to be children again, And if you look from this perspective, maybe a lack of contribution at a camp is actually a good thing because it shows that they can feel safe, they can be children, and just let someone, contribute, let someone take care of them during this time. The theme that seemed to be unique for the context of war is what I called a sense of normalcy. I didn't call it normalcy because I think that life in Ukraine is far from normal. But what camps can give adolescents is a sense of normalcy, and even that seems to be enough to start with. So campers come from their permanent community where they have to live with this constant ambiguity and threat and unexpected something unexpected happen every day, and they come to this place of predictable routine, and that offers them a break and creates this sense of normalcy and safety. I know what's going to happen. I know my schedule. I know what's going to happen tomorrow at 9 and so on. So that actually creates this sense of safety, especially for the camps that are located in the west, in the Carpathian Mountains. As I said before, campers can escape from the daily triggers of their life, like air raid sirens, the news, and so on. The environment of normalcy allows them to be kids again and just have opportunities for joy, laughter, and play. And that is the reason why parents are willing to take risks and let their children go to the camp. And the more I thought about this theme as a particular benefit of Christian camping during the war, the more I realized that it may not be as unique in the to the context of war as I initially thought. When we talk about temporary communities, we understand that it's a place set apart from the permanent community, and it's designed to be different. It's designed to address the needs that cannot be as easily met in their permanent community. So normally what happens in normal times, the children live with the predictable routines and structures and expectations in their permanent community. And while these routines are important, they sometimes can be a barrier to growth. So when we take them to camp, we offer to them something that some authors called anti-structure, something completely different. And that actually fosters the growth and development, something very different from their normal experience. During the war, it's almost vice versa. So the daily life of adolescents is a sustained infrastructure when normal development context is disrupted. In this light, Christian camps function not as a break from stability and predictability, but as a brief restoration of it, offering predictable rhythms and relational safety and space for healing. But at the heart of it, it's still the idea that we are offering something different from their permanent community, something that is lacking in their permanent community. And that remains the same at any time and in any context, which means that we should really study the context our campers are coming from, so we could offer them something that is lacking in their context, their environment. So these four big themes that emerged from my study are something that, in my opinion, represents the core of what Christian camping is. However, of course, we had also to change a lot of things. And mostly things we changed in Ukrainian camps during the war, they were on the level of implementing these four core big elements. First, some adjustments had to happen with the programming. It is important to be aware of new triggers that may include loud, unexpected noise or light, anything that may resemble explosion, like a simple example would be air balloons. We don't want to use air balloons in camps right now. Camp professionals had to revise every game and every activity to avoid any war-themed games like Minefield. There was this team building, or even games like Capture the Flag. Maybe that's not a good time to play those kind of games. Sometimes even a question about family can be triggering. These kinds of conversations require sensitivity, allowing a camper not to share, or being ready that a camper can share a story of loss. And how do you respond to that? It's important to allow for enough time for reflection. And also, some program coordinators also share that there is a change of interests, and it possibly can be related to what we called forced maturity. So again, we need to stay curious. We need to observe, ask questions, and be careful with assumptions coming, from our previous experience when, oh, we know what these kids would like. So we just need to be aware things changed. Camp directors noted that there is a need in training in new skills, such as basic knowledge of how trauma can affect behavior and attitude, how to deal with panic attacks, and also to be prepared to answer some really hard questions honestly. And there is a growing understanding that self-leadership is very important. Camp counselors need to know how to take care of themselves to be able to respond to the camper's need and avoid burnout. Which is why it's important to talk about self-differentiation to be able to manage emotional burdens. Majority of camp staff in Ukraine are volunteers, so they talked about how important it is to understand that they are called to this ministry. So understanding of calling is very important. Now, what are the implications of this study for the ministry beyond the context of war in Ukraine? What can we learn from the Ukraine experience? Even though you may live in a very different context, there are still all kinds of crises that young people are going through, not just the war. And the formative power of camp is not created by crisis, it is intensified by it. My second thought in this is that in chaotic environment, whichever it may be the war or broken family relationship or anything else, the predictable structure can be healing and can create a sense of safety that can help them build resilience. The apparent maturity shaped by trauma should not be mistaken for flourishing. It may look like positive contribution on the surface when we talked about positive youth development and contribution. It may seem similar on the surface to the forced maturity phenomena, but they are different because contribution comes out of positive development, of having the safety net in their life, and that's their choice to contribute. Forced maturity is more like a coping mechanism. For us in Ukraine, we realize that we may not yet know how this will affect the lives of our children when they grow up. What we do know is that this requires a lot of pastoral care. The importance of trauma-informed programming is relevant not only in Ukraine. There are all kinds of trauma and that young generation may be experiencing. And my fourth implication is that investing in developing leaders should be a priority. Only leaders who are equipped, emotionally healthy, and spiritually growing are able to lead campers well without burnout. So, the core benefit of camp: faith formation, supportive community, developmental outcomes are not diminished in crisis. They are amplified. In times of profound adversity, intentional temporary communities are not simply an escape from reality. They are a vital space to build resilience needed to face this reality. That's all I have for now. And I would love to hear some questions and comments if you have them. I will just say this last thing. If you want to know a bit more about Christian camps in Ukraine, there is an article that Muhia Karenjahi and another professor from Wheaton College and I published, and it's based on my thesis project, and you are welcome to read it if you want. And also you see the contact information of CCI Ukraine. If you have any questions, you want to hear stories, you want to know more about what camps in Ukraine are doing right now, you're welcome to just send us an email. And there's also my email here if you want to contact me, you can.